Okay, um, I think I planned this because I think that some might come in that weren't here previously. So I'm going to do a very quick recap of the first 5 days and then lock onto the sixth day, which is my assignment. So that's where we're going with this. Um, so it starts off with verses, the whole overview of the creation account starts in verse 1 and goes into chapter 2. Um, verse 1 says, in the beginning, verses 1 and 2 tells us things that were already there before the creation events that Moses wrote about began. Verses 3 through 5 is day 1, where God created light, the day-night cycle, and he did the first of several separations, separating light from dark. And then verses 6 through 8 is day 2. He created the atmosphere. He did the second separation of his three separations, where he separated water below from water above with the atmosphere in between. And then verses 9 and 10 is day 3, and that's the third separation, where he separates the water from the dry land, gathering the water in one spot, consequently creating the dry land part of the earth at this point. And at that point, as you can see on this slide, now that life is able to be sustained, there's water, there's land, there's atmosphere, um, there's energy, there's gravity. And so at this point, this is the first time he says it was good. And then still on day 3, verses 11 through 13, he creates the flora, the vegetation part of the system. And then we're into, um, um, and then I don't list the other days because of temporary insanity. But I'll get to that. All right, so verse 1, in the beginning. This is the start of the God's creating actions that Moses described. Not everything was created in this account. There are 4 things that already existed. Water already existed. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And verse 2 says, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving or hovering or vibrating over the surface of the waters. So this material pre-existed the account of Moses doing the creation. Since water existed, energy existed, because energy is required for water to exist, for the atoms that form water to exist and to operate. And since water had a surface, gravity existed already. And finally, though not listed by Moses, Job lists the fact that angels were there as well. Job 34, 4 through 7 says, where were you when God speaking, when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars, representing angels, sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. So Moses writes about a significant part of God's creation, but these 4 things pre-existed that. So in the beginning, God created, and God is Elohim. That's the Trinity operating. And created is a word which means to make something new. So verse 2 says, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. So it was formless, it was void, it was dark, it was a mass of water, and it was receiving God's personal attention. Holy Spirit was moving over the surface of the waters. As far as being formless and void, formless translates tohu, which just means not in any discernible form. It's not organized. Void translates bohu, which means there's no stuff associated with it. It's not populated. We can find both those words used in that very same sense by the prophet Jeremiah in 4:23, where he describes a ruined, unpopulated wasteland. It goes, and I looked on the earth, and behold, it was without form, tohu, and void, bohu, and to the heavens, and they had no light. Talking about a place under God's judgment in the promised land that was made as a desolate wilderness. And the earth was dark. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. So it was a complete, total, absolute darkness, possibly like the ninth plague. In Exodus chapter 10, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt. Maybe the kind of darkness you get when you do a cave tour and you turn off the lights down in there, that sort of thing. You know, can't see a thing. And darkness was over the surface of the deep. And surface means presence or surface. In this context, it comes to us across as the surface of it. And deep translates this word tehom. Jonah uses that same word for deep water. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head. Him talking about his state of being when he's down in the depths of the ocean, either before or after he's been swallowed up by that creature. Psalm 71 uses the same word. For you have made me see many troubles and calamities. You will revive me again from the depths of the earth. You will bring me up again. Uses the same word, from the depths of the earth. And it was initially formless, without discernible shape, but after he created the water, God formed it into a sphere. And we can get that from Proverbs 8:27, where it says, when he established the heavens, I was there, and when he drew a circle on the face of the deep. So we have a shape at this point. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Spirit, ruach, means, depends on the context here. It's talking about the Holy Spirit. And he's moving. That word can mean vibrating, fluttering, shaking. My mental image is that hummingbird that's right there next to the flower or next to its nest. So God was brooding or hovering over it. Those are fair ways of translating that word. He was imparting energy to it. Movement is energy. And notice that God is not just present over it, he is moving over it. He's active in the presence of this stuff he has made. So what did he create on day one? Well, verses 3-5 go, then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, darkness he called night. There was evening and morning one day. So he created light, he created day itself. He created the state of Earth's existence we would call day. Similarly, he created night. So he created a day-night cycle at this point. And this implied that this water mass is now rotating in the presence of an external light source to give it a day-night cycle. And there was evening and there was morning one day. Day 2, verses 6-8. Then God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let that expanse separate the waters from the waters. God made the expanse, God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse, and it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. There was evening and morning, second day. So what was already there when he starts day 2? The planet, the water, light, up and down. And so what did he create? He created an expanse. That word really means thinness, a separation of the waters. He called the expanse, separation of the waters, Shemayim, which means heaven. It can mean any of the 3 heavens the Bible talks about. The first heaven is the atmosphere. The second heaven is the cosmos. And the third heaven is where God dwells. This is that first of those 3 heavens. Below the Shemayim, the sea. Above the Shemayim, more water. Possibly a water vapor that is occluding sun's ultraviolet radiation. It's a very common theory that may be correct. Okay. Day 3, verses 9-13, he covers the dry land and the vegetation. Then God said, let the waters below the heavens, Shemayim, be gathered into one place. let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas. God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit after their kind, with seed in them on the earth, and it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind, and God saw that it was good. There was evening and morning, third day. So at the start of this day, below the atmosphere was only water. Now, there was either rocks or dirt about to be created ex nihilo out of nothing. That's a possibility. Or they were already there and covered by the water. Or they were dissolved in the water. Their materials were dissolved in the water. Those are three possibilities. And there was a 24-hour day-night cycle already in effect. So this ball of water, this earth, was rotating, as I told you before, in the presence of a light source out in space shining on it, which would eventually be replaced by the sun, but not yet. And so this is the third of the three separations, sea and dry land. Dry land, eretz, is earth, and the gathered waters are the sea. And it says gathered into one place. So at this point, the earth is comprised of one sea and one continent. And God declared it good. As far as the vegetation, God continued to create by speaking. He created grasses, herbs, shrubs, bushes, trees, and they were created full-grown and mature. Okay? To exist, and they were created to resist and reproduce after their kind, within their species. The oak tree doesn't turn into the tulip and vice versa. Okay? And God declared it good. Now, this is an interesting thing you may not have noticed. On day 3, he declares it good twice. After he gets the continent set up, that's good. Then after he gets the vegetation up, that's good. Day 4, he creates the astronomical bodies, verses 14 through 19. Then God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens, same word, shamayim, to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night, and he made the stars also. Isn't it interesting? God inspired Moses to put that almost as an afterthought. All of that. An atheist, probably not an atheist anymore, but an atheist astronomer named Carl Sagan used to look up there and say, if we're the only ones here, what a waste of space. And he sort of got the point, because God created it just because he could. Just to this extravagant display of power that he did that. All right, so day 4. So he created light-giving objects, and he created them again by speaking, and he created them in the heavens. And he created them for 6 reasons. 4 in our text, and a couple more I'll show you. So the text talks about those 2 great lights, the one to govern the day, of course, the sun, lesser light to govern the night, and the stars also. Where did he create them? In the firmament, in the expanse, the heavens, outer space, if you will. Why did he create them? 1 is to govern the day-night cycle, sun for day, moon for night. 2, to provide signs on the earth. And we can see that in operation by the Magi. Remember that in Matthew 2? After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For he saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. Sign in the heavens. And to mark the passage of time, seasons, for example, and to provide light on the earth. He also uses those astronomical bodies he created to assure Israel that he would keep his promise to preserve them. You can find that in Jeremiah 31. I'll read that to you. Thus says the Lord, who gives the sun for light by day and the fixed order of the moon and the stars for light by night, who stirs up the sea that its waves roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If this fixed order departs from before me, declares the Lord, then shall the offspring of Israel cease from being a nation before me forever. So he's using all of that to make that point for them. Anytime they start worrying about that, they can just look up there. Oh, here comes the moon again. Here comes the sun again in the morning. Those stars there, and they can look at those words by the prophet. And to declare God's glory. Psalm 19, 1 through 6, Psalm 89, 5. Psalm 89, 5. Let the heavens praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones. Psalm 19, I'll just start with verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. And then the subsequent verses talk about there's no location where that message is not being heard, and there's no language where that message is not being understood. So everybody's getting the point. 6 reasons. And God saw that it was good. Well, day 5 then, the water creatures and the birds, that's in verses 20 through 23. Then God said, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures. Let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens. And God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters teemed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, a 5th day. So the waters teeming with living creatures, and the birds flying above the earth across the expanse of the sky. So he created sea creatures. Tanin is the word for them, sometimes translated monsters in some of the English translations. And he created every living creature that moves and has its domain in the waters, and every winged bird after its kind. Here's a couple examples of tamim, that's a giant squid that could have qualified for that. Here's some corpses of possibly a plesiosaur that was pulled up out of the ocean a few years ago. Here's another possible plesiosaur. So there were large sea creatures. There may still be. It's a fairly unexplored domain on Earth under the sea. And he created the land creatures, all sorts of land creatures. I particularly like this one. This is one of you when I say something that's kind of confusing. All right. So how did God make them? By speaking again. And what did he make them from? From the earth. And he caused them to come forth from the earth. And what did he make? He made domesticated animals. He made creeping things. I think of them as creepy things. And he made beasts, non-domesticated animals. Those 3 categories. Domesticated animals. How'd you like to shear that one sheep? Creepy things. Trapdoor spider, an antlion, lightning bug, all kinds of things. And non-domesticated animals. It's a mountain goat on the side of a cliff, standing on no discernible surface. God's showing off. And God saw that it was good. And this is all on day 6, the land creatures, and he also created mankind. Verses 26 through 31, let me read that to you. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree that has fruit yielding seed, and it shall be food for you. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth, which has life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So let's work through that. So verse 26 and 27, God made a kind of being in his image and likeness. Why did he make him? Made him for three reasons: to populate the earth, to subdue the earth, and to exercise dominion over all the living things on the earth. And then, verse 26, after he had made all those other things, including the cattle and so forth and the beasts on the first part of day 6, it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image." So God made mankind last of all. That was the last thing he did. And God said, "Let us make man in our image." God is translating Elohim, the triune God, and the pronouns there are reinforcing that fact. Now, there is a big difference on what we've seen before and what's going on right now. Before, everything God created was by his command. Let there be, and it was. This time, he creates by consultation among the members of the Trinity, and then he forms man. So it's created by his actual working, not just speaking. So there's a significant difference between how God relates to us, his creation of man, versus everything else he made. Verse 28 says, "In our image, after our likeness." Notice image and likeness are singular. So though three persons are operating, the three persons of the Trinity, they're creating one image and one likeness. So you see the unity of the Trinity on display. When we studied the Trinity in Sunday school last year, we saw both the plurality of the Trinity and the unity of the Trinity simultaneously in all those verses. So a being in the image and likeness of the triune God. Most commentators, including the reformers like Calvin and Luther, etc., consider these synonyms, repeated for emphasis. Calvin points out that if you go a little farther downstream, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27 uses the word image twice, but doesn't use the word likeness. You go a little farther in Genesis chapter 5, you just see the opposite. The word likeness is used twice, and the word image doesn't appear. So these are considered basically to be synonyms telling us the same thing. Likeness could add the idea of not being an exact image. Man resembling and representing God in certain ways, but not in every way. You can contrast that with Hebrews 1:3, which says Christ is the exact representation of God's nature. Talking about Christ in Hebrews 1:3, he is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. So the big question, what does it mean to be in God's image? Well, here's what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean something physical. God is spirit. John 4:24, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. And he's invisible. 1 Timothy 1:17, to the King of the ages, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honor and glory forever and ever. You might say, well, he became visible in the incarnation, and one person of the Trinity is now visible. All true, but that was not the case back when these things were being created and when his image was being discussed among the Trinity itself. Let us make man in our image. And it doesn't mean something about man having dominion. Even though God has dominion and so does man, after man lost the dominion in the fall, let's face it, whales no longer obey you or me, nor do birds, as they did before the fall. Um, but yet, after that, man is still being treated as being in God's image. Genesis 9:6 says, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. So he didn't lose that image with the fall. So it doesn't mean physical or even his dominion over things. Well, what does it mean? What it might mean. And you might say, why the uncertainty? And the reason is because God doesn't tell us what it means to be in his image. God says we are made in his likeness, and that saints are being transformed into his likeness, and all those verses there, but he doesn't tell us what the likeness is. So how do we figure it out? Well, here's one way. We'll notice what God reveals about himself that we could display, his communicable attributes. And notice the difference. We could also, it's useful to notice the difference between man and all the other living things God created. And that can give us a sense of what it might be to be in God's image. Well, God created man with mental capabilities of personhood, self-awareness, self-consciousness, ability to reason and think in an abstract way, self-will, ability to understand and appreciate beauty. And this may be part of, but can't be all of God's image. Angels have personhood, and they're not said to be in God's image, but this can be part of it. And God created man to have relational capabilities, not just practical and functional relations like many creatures have, but the ability and inclination to form voluntary and emotional bonds, and attributes that we can see of kindness, gentleness, generosity, and so forth. And finally, the big one, the ability to worship and love God, to have that relationship with him. And man's created with spiritual and ethical capabilities. All of these, righteousness, holiness, goodness, uprightness, wisdom, a moral sense, truthfulness, innocence, spiritual discernment, love. All of these were part of the package, still there after the fall, but attenuated somewhat by sin and the sin nature that is a result of that, but not completely gone. So what are the implications of being in God's image? Well, for everyone, the unauthorized taking of a life requires the payment of a life. That's one of the implications. I read you Genesis 9:6, Exodus 21:12, Leviticus 24:17, say much the same thing. For the saint, the person called out by God unto salvation, don't be confused whenever we use saint. We're just talking about a saved person. We're not talking about a perfected person like the Roman Church likes to talk about it. Hagios just means a called out person, okay? Every person God has regenerated and has called with that effectual calling to himself. Remember, Jesus said, all the Father gives me will come to me. And no one can come to me unless the Father draws him. That's a pulling against resistance. So God's going to pull each person he's elected into relationship with him. That person being regenerated responds in faith and surrender to Christ. All of those, that whole soteriological package, that's the same. Okay, so for the saints, one of the implications of being in God's image is abundant hope in their present time. Romans 8:28 and 29 says everything God causes to work together to the saint, the one who's called by God and who loves him according to that call, according to God's purpose. That person, God promises to make everything work together for the outcome in verse 29 of making him like Christ. So on your worst day, in your worst experience, this is still true. God is using everything. So nothing is wasted. Nothing is, even your sin, God causes in some way, probably by him disciplining you. And when you come out the other end of that, you're better off and more sanctified. So even your sin, every single thing he lets you experience makes you one step closer to being in the image of Christ. So everything is positive. Everything is profitable for that objective. That's a great hope that we get to have in the present. And 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, in the present, we're being transformed into increasing levels of glory. It goes, and we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed, not will be transformed in the future. We're being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. And for this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. So this is happening in our present time. And we're being renewed continually in knowledge after God's image, Colossians 3:10, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. So these are the present implications. Some of them, there's probably a lot more for the saint being in God's image. And the abundant hope also for the future. Philippians 3:21 talks about the saints going to receive a body like Christ's glorious resurrected body. Talking about Christ who will transform our lowly body to be like his glorious body by the power that enables him even to subject all things to himself. And then 1 John 3:2 says, beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. So ability to see Christ as he is in his fullness and be like him in some wonderful but unspecified way. So you can just kind of imagine what it is, and your imagination will probably have some truth to it in terms of that. And you can study Christ's resurrected body on earth in those 45 days he was here, and you can study what it's going to look like when he returns to earth, and he's doing all of this in his glorified body, and then you can apply that to the body you're going to get in heaven. So great hope for your future, all because of being in his image. So why did God make man? For at least 5 reasons. To exercise dominion over all other living things, Genesis 1:26, that I read you. To populate the earth, 1:28. To subdue the earth, same verse. And to have fellowship with God. We get that from the fact that Genesis 3:8 talked about God walking in the garden, ostensibly routinely walking with Adam and Eve, walking in the garden in the cool of the day. This particular case, after they were hiding themselves, he said, where are you? It's almost like, I'm here, where are you? You know? So fellowship. Enoch walked with God, Genesis 5:24. 1 Corinthians 1:9, saints are called into fellowship with Jesus Christ. And another purpose is to glorify God. Isaiah 43:7 talks about that. Bring my sons from afar, talking about Israel, and my daughters from the ends of the earth, everyone who's called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. So the direct context is about Israel, but the second clause is understood to apply to all the saints. In Revelation 4:11, I'll read you 9, 10, and 11. And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who is seated on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, saying, worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created, including creating man in his image. Moving on to the next part of day 6, verses 26 through 31, finishing off the chapter, God's provision for the survival of the air breathers, which would be us plus the animals. God created all of them to be vegetarians. No sin, thus no death, So nothing was being killed and eaten that God treats as being alive. After the entrance of sin, after the curse, survival was harder and death was common. So God at that point gave man permission to be carnivorous. He said, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. You might recall when he was helping Peter understand that the law was satisfied by Christ, and now it was all of those dietary restrictions of the law were over with, and he told him that to get him over the hump so he could talk to the Gentiles, Cornelius's house the next day. So what did he let down in the sheet? A whole bunch of vegetables? No, let down a whole bunch of living things. And day 6 ends with, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. So that concludes my section on day 6, and I have a little time. What I thought I'd do is teach you a short song, and then if there's questions or discussion, we'll have time for that. Okay? So if you could hand out some, please. And if you could hand out some. If you run out, Mackenzie's got most of them. Thanks, Mackenzie. Okay, once you have the words, I'll sing it once through, and then we'll sing it together. Okay? Mackenzie's got a few more there. All right, here's how the song goes. So just watch the words because you'll be singing it next time. On the first day, God made the light. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 1, day 1. On the next day, day 2, God made the sky. Water down below and water way up high. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 2, day 2. On the next day, day 3, God made the seas. He made the land and all the flowers and the trees. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 3, day 3. On the next day, day 4, God made the sun. He made the moon and stars and numbered every one. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 4, day 4. On the next day, day 5, God made the fish. He made the birds that fly most anywhere they wish. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 5, day 5. On the next day, day 6, God made man. He made the animals that live upon the land. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 6, day 6. On the next day, day 7, God took a rest. He said the 7th day forever would be blessed. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 7, day 7. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now it's your turn. Stand up. On the first day, day 1, God made the light. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 1, day 1. On the next day, day 2, God made the sky. Water down below and water way up high. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 2, day 2. On the next day, day 3, God made the sea. He made the land and all the flowers and the trees. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 3, day 3. On the next day, day 4, God made the sun. He made the moon and stars and numbered every one. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 4, day 4. On the next day, day 5, God made the fish. He made the birds that fly most anywhere they wish. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 5, day 5. On the next day, day 6, God made man. He made the animals that live upon the land. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 6, day 6. On the next day, day 7, God took a rest. He said the 7th day forever would be blessed. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 7, day 7. God spoke and it was so. That is how I know there was evening, there was morning, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Good. So, any questions or comments? No, it's a Child Evangelism Fellowship song, I think. So, any thoughts? If not, I'll dismiss you, but I want to give you a chance if something occurs. We're done with Genesis chapter 1. What? Oh, the guitar. He didn't create the guitar in that day, but created the wood.
In terms of eternity, in creation, God made man in His image. Um, you know, when relating to the creation account of man and explaining, what I try to do in the witness side of things, through the creation, God made man in His image, that we are eternal beings, and not just focus on eternal in the sense of being in God's glory when one accepts salvation in Christ when we're saved, but also that those being judged are eternal beings as well. We want them to lose sight of the fact that they are eternal beings whether they're saved or not saved. So I usually, when I witness, I'll pull them through the account of creation, and I highlight those verses where God said it was so, and showing the power of God. He spoke it and it happened. But when it comes to man, like you pointed out, let us make man in our image, talking about the conversation that's going on between the Trinity about man. Mm-hmm. So I use that to set the tone for the eternal being side, explain that we are eternal beings made in His image.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah.
And I'm witnessing somebody, and I'll try to pull it
Yeah, thank you. That very powerful point and sobering, isn't it? That the one who rejects God is also eternal. Um, a lot of times when you read the commentaries, they won't include that in His image because God's eternality goes backwards as well as forwards. Man's only goes forwards. So it's kind of half eternal, if you will, the forward half. But okay, thanks. Any other thoughts? Yes, sir.
You mentioned it. God said, let's make a man in our image and in our likeness. Well, we read over chapter 3, and it says, man has become like us, knowing good and evil. That like, is that the same like as in our likeness?
Um, I think I would interpret that context as being a very simple idea that he says what he means by like us in that very verse. It says he knows by experience good and evil. He was innocent before the fall, did not know evil by experience. He knew academically about evil because God said there's a consequence if you disobey me. But he didn't know by experience. It wasn't part of his being, and now it was, which leads to a very interesting theological concept I'm not prepared to answer, and that's so how does God know evil? He certainly doesn't know it by experience, um, uh, but in some way, man's exposure to good and evil um, was different. Once sin occurred, and God makes a point there. So I would interpret like there in a different way than likeness in this context. So
You mentioned that. God created everything. It's an evil created thing.
say again.
Is evil a created thing? Just like thought. Is thought a created thing? Paul says nothing can separate us from God. Nothing that has been created. Well, thought is a created thing.
So any other questions?
Good to be with you. Okay.
Hold on to that thought for next week. I have no idea, John.